What's up, everyone? I've got something really exciting to dive into with you today. A few days ago, Aptera dropped an absolute gem of an image that has the entire community buzzing. We're talking about a detailed shot of their chassis, complete with all the wiring, the wheels, the battery configuration, basically, the guts of this revolutionary vehicle laid bare for us to see. And let me tell you, when I first saw this image, my mind immediately started racing with questions, observations, and honestly, a ton of curiosity about what we're actually looking at here. So here's what I'm thinking. Let's take this journey together. Let's put on our detective hats and really dig into what Aptera is showing us. Because this isn't just any ordinary chassis photo. This is potentially our first real glimpse into what production-level components actually look like. This is the stuff that's going to be rolling off the assembly line and hitting the roads. And that makes every single detail in this image absolutely fascinating. Now, before we get too deep into the weeds, let me set the stage for what we're looking at. The image shows the complete chassis assembly with the battery pack integrated right into the structure. And if you know anything about electric vehicle design, you know that the battery pack isn't just a component. It's essentially the foundation of the entire vehicle. It's what everything else builds around. So seeing it positioned here, seeing how everything connects to it, that's huge. The first thing that immediately catches your eye are these bright orange lines running throughout the chassis. Now, if you're familiar with electric vehicle conventions, you'll know that orange is the universal color code for high voltage lines. It's a safety standard across the industry. These aren't just decorative choices. These are serious electrical pathways carrying the kind of power that makes these vehicles move. And when you trace these orange lines with your eyes, you can see exactly where they're headed. They're running directly to the motors, which are positioned right here at the front wheels on both sides. Speaking of those motors, let's talk about the suspension setup for a second, because it's actually quite interesting. You can clearly see the shocks mounted transversely. That means they're positioned across the vehicle rather than vertically. This is paired with control arms that manage the wheel movement, and you've got your drive shafts connecting everything to make those wheels turn. The steering components are all visible too, giving you a sense of just how compact and efficient this front-end design really is. But here's where things start getting really intriguing, and this is something I've been puzzling over since I first examined this image closely. Take a look at what appear to be the cast chassis pieces. Now, casting is a manufacturing process where molten metal is poured into molds to create complex shapes in one piece. It's incredibly efficient for mass production because you can create intricate structures without having to weld together dozens of separate components. But here's the thing. When you look at this chassis, it doesn't appear to be one massive single casting. Instead, what I'm seeing suggests that Aptera is casting this in sections. You've got what looks like a front section that's been cast as one piece. And then you've got a rear section that's been cast separately. And if you look carefully at the middle section of the chassis, you can see what appear to be weld points, specifically here and here. What this tells me is that they're likely manufacturing the front casting, manufacturing the rear casting, and then joining them together in the middle with some linear welded pieces. Now, why would they do this instead of just casting the whole thing as one giant piece? Well, there are actually some really practical reasons for this approach. First off, creating a single casting that large would require absolutely massive equipment. We're talking about casting machines of enormous proportions. Not every facility has that capability. By breaking it into sections, they can use more standard casting equipment, which makes manufacturing more flexible and potentially allows them to work with multiple suppliers if needed. Plus, if there's a defect in one section, they only have to scrap that section rather than an entire massive casting. It's a smart manufacturing strategy that balances efficiency with practicality. Now let's talk about these other lines we're seeing throughout the chassis, because this is where things get a bit mysterious and honestly, where I'd love to hear what you all think. The black lines running through the system, I'm fairly confident these are coolant lines. In an electric vehicle, thermal management is absolutely critical. Your battery needs to stay within a specific temperature range to perform optimally and safely. Your motors generate heat. Your power electronics generate heat. All of that needs to be managed, and coolant lines are how you do it. So those black lines make sense to me as part of the thermal management system. But then we've got these white lines, and this is where the community discussion has been really interesting. Someone in the Discord community suggested that these might be refrigerant lines, and the more I look at them, the more I think that might actually be correct. They do have that metallic appearance that you'd expect from refrigerant lines. Refrigerant is what's used in air conditioning systems. It's the fluid that actually absorbs heat from one area and releases it in another. But here's what's puzzling me, and maybe you can help me figure this out. Why would refrigerant lines need to run all the way to the back of the vehicle? Think about it. Your cabin air conditioning is up front where the passengers are. So, why route refrigerant lines the entire length of the vehicle to the rear? Is this part of a more sophisticated thermal management strategy where they're using the air conditioning system to also help cool the battery pack? That would actually make some sense because you've already got a refrigeration system for cabin comfort, so why not leverage it for battery cooling too? But I'm genuinely curious about the engineering reasoning here, and I'm hoping we can get some answers to this question. Another thing that's caught my attention is the routing of some of these high voltage lines. There are a few orange lines that seem to be routed in what I'd call somewhat unusual paths. I can't say for certain whether this is their permanent position or if this is just how things are arranged for this particular validation build. Some of these lines appear to be routed above certain components, and you've got to remember that the Aptera has this prominent central tunnel running down the middle of the vehicle. Well, now we're getting to see exactly what that central tunnel is for. It's housing a lot of this wiring and these various lines that need to run the length of the vehicle. And this brings me to something I've been wondering about for quite a while now, and I'm still scratching my head over it. If you look at the battery pack carefully, you'll notice that all of the connection points, all of the inputs and outputs, are located at the rear portion of the battery. You can see all the high voltage connections plugging in right here at the back. But here's the thing, those high voltage lines then have to run all the way to the front of the vehicle to reach the controllers and the motors. Now I can see one advantage to this configuration. The charge port is located at the rear of the vehicle, right? So having the battery connections at the rear means a shorter distance from the charge port to the battery. That's one less long cable run you have to deal with. But, and this is a big but, that's just one line we're talking about. One charge line. Meanwhile, you've got multiple high voltage lines that have to make the journey all the way from the back to the front to power the motors and connect to the controllers. As someone who isn't an engineer, I keep thinking, wouldn't it make more sense to have the battery connections at the front? If you did that, most of your high voltage lines would be super short, just quick connections to the nearby motors and controllers, and then you'd only have that one charge line running to the back. It seems like you'd reduce the overall amount of high voltage cabling needed, which would make the vehicle cheaper to produce, lighter, and probably a bit simpler to assemble. And while we're on the topic of the rear charge port, let me throw out another question that's been heavily debated in the community. Why put the charge port in the back at all? Now, there are some arguments in favor of this design. If you've ever used a Tesla supercharger, you know that the standard practice is to back into the charging stalls. The charging cables are positioned so that backing in gives you the optimal cable reach. So if you're designing a vehicle with supercharger compatibility in mind, a rear charge port makes some sense for that use case. But here's my counter-argument, and again, I'm sure there's engineering wisdom I'm missing here, but hear me out. What if you put the charge port in the front, and also positioned the battery connections in the front? Now all your high voltage lines are compacted into one area at the front of the vehicle. Everything is close together. You've reduced your wiring significantly, which saves weight, cost, and complexity. And as for the charge port location itself, there appears to be plenty of space under the nose of the vehicle where you could cleverly integrate a charge port. It could be hidden, aerodynamic, and still easily accessible. This is honestly one of the questions I'm most excited to ask when I get the chance to visit the facility. What drove this particular design decision? I'm absolutely certain there's a solid engineering rationale that I'm not seeing. Maybe there are crash safety considerations. Maybe it has to do with weight distribution. Maybe there are thermal management reasons we haven't considered. Maybe it's about manufacturing efficiency in ways that aren't obvious from just looking at a photo. But I really want to understand the thinking, because right now it's one of those design choices that feels counterintuitive to me. Now, let's talk about the drivetrain configuration, because this is pretty straightforward and confirms what we already knew. This is not an all-wheel drive vehicle. When you look at the rear of the chassis, there's no motor back there. There's no drivetrain connecting to the rear wheel. This is a front-wheel drive configuration, with motors at each front wheel, giving you that dual motor setup for better control and redundancy. But the rear is just along for the ride. For a vehicle focused on maximum efficiency like the Aptera, this makes total sense. Every component adds weight, and all-wheel drive would add weight and complexity that isn't necessary for the vehicle's intended purpose. One small detail that caught my eye: they're using these manual casters to move the chassis around the facility. You know, those little wheeled devices that let you roll heavy objects across the floor. It's interesting because Aptera had brought in these Red Viking automated guided vehicles, or AGVs, a few years back. These are robotic transport systems that can move components around a factory floor automatically, but I'm not seeing them in this image, and it makes me wonder what the current status of those AGVs is. Are they still planning to use them in the production process? Have plans changed? Is there a different automation strategy in place now? These are the kinds of behind-the-scenes details that I find absolutely fascinating, because they tell you so much about how a company is actually planning to manufacture at scale. What we're looking at here is the chassis before the body gets mounted to it, and one of the things I'm really hoping to see when I visit the facility is these validation builds in various stages of completion. Imagine being able to see one chassis at this bare stage, another with the body partially mounted, another further along in the assembly process. It would give you such a complete picture of how everything comes together. It would be like seeing the entire manufacturing story unfold before your eyes. And honestly, what I would absolutely love, and I'm really hoping this might be possible, is to get an engineer to walk us through all of this while we're looking at it in person. Can you imagine having someone who actually designed these systems explaining exactly what we're looking at? Why each component is positioned where it is, what the routing decisions were based on, what constraints they were working within, what innovations they developed to solve specific problems. That would be incredibly valuable, not just for satisfying our curiosity, but for really understanding the engineering philosophy behind this vehicle. Because ultimately, that's what all these questions come down to. Every single design decision was made for specific reasons. The weld points instead of a single casting, there's a reason. The battery connections at the rear, there's a reason. The charge port location, there's a reason. The way the high voltage lines are routed, there's a reason. And understanding those reasons helps us appreciate not just what Aptera is building, but how they're thinking about the entire challenge of creating an ultra-efficient vehicle. Looking at the components in this image, I have to say, they look pretty production-ready to me. These don't have that prototype cobbled-together appearance. These look like parts that were designed for manufacturing, designed to be reproduced consistently, designed to fit together the same way every single time, and that's significant. One of the key questions we'll want to answer when seeing more of these builds is how much of what we're looking at consists of actual production parts versus one-off prototype components, because that ratio tells you a lot about how close a company is to real production. And make no mistake, things are definitely being built. These vehicles are coming together. Based on everything I'm seeing and the information available, my calculations suggest they're working on about 10 of these validation builds. And from what this image shows, it seems like they're getting very close to having these ready for the validation testing phase. That's when the real-world performance testing begins, when you take these vehicles and put them through every conceivable scenario to make sure they perform as designed. There's just a tremendous amount of activity happening right now, and it's genuinely exciting for those of us who've been following this project. Seeing actual hardware at this level of completion is incredible. This isn't vaporware. This isn't just computer renderings anymore. These are real components, real systems, real vehicles taking shape. So I want to hear from you. What do you think about what we're seeing here? Do you have insights into any of these design decisions that I'm puzzling over? Do you see something in this image that I didn't point out? Are there details I missed or misinterpreted? Drop your observations in the comments below, because collectively, we can probably figure out a lot more than any one of us could alone. That's the beauty of having a community of people who are all passionate about this technology and eager to understand how it works. The bottom line is this: Aptera is building these vehicles, and they look phenomenal. The engineering is coming together in tangible, visible ways. We're watching something special unfold, and I couldn't be more excited to see where this goes next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.